But first, the YWCA is on a mission to eliminate racism and empower women. The theme of this year's Stand Against Racism campaign is Women of Color Leading Change. Joining us today is Dr. Danielle Mosley, the President and Executive Director of YWCA of the City of New York. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, especially to talk about this fight against racism. This is actually a campaign that's about 10 years old, right?
Right.
And why was this something, from the beginning, the YWCA said, you know, we want to get behind?
Sure. So the YWCA USA was the first national organization to have an interracial charter. Dr. Dorothy Height, who we know for many of her civic activities, was at the forefront of a national movement that dates back to the 40s and 50s to really bring this idea of intersectionality to the YWCA's framework. And that's kind of where we grew into not just empowering women, but recognizing that race shapes everything about our economic, social, political engagements in communities.
And this year's theme focusing on women of color. Why is that an area of concern, especially for the YWCA?
So I think we see women of color like ourselves making enormous gains in the workplace and communities. Black women now represent one of the most educated groups of women in the country. We are the fastest growing group of female entrepreneurs in the country, but we still make 64 cents on the dollar for every dollar that a white man makes doing comparable work. So we know that there's been lots of progress, but we really need to kind of elevate and bring to light some of the issues that we still face.
And how do you do this within the context of your campaign? How do you go about? You've got this period of time. It's the end of the month, really a week coming up here, April 27th through the 30th. And what are some of the things that you'll do in that time period to really highlight what you think people need to know about this issue?
Right. So there are over 200 affiliates across the country, and all of us are doing work, whether it's in domestic violence, workforce development. We do a lot with young people and through our salon series to kind of consistently bring these issues to the fore. The campaign gives us an opportunity to more intentionally bring the larger community into the conversation that we as YWCA should be having as part of our daily kind of work practice. Yeah. And so for us, we will be hosting a screening of Ava DuVernay's 13th. With a discussion guide accompanying that screening that's open to the community. But YWCAs across the country are hosting a total of 350 events aimed to facilitate conversation, get people thinking about the structural and institutional barriers that we face, and to really help us frame some of these issues differently than we have historically.
And I know there's also, you talked about women like me and you, but there's also concern, especially for girls of color. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Right. So recently, under the leadership of Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito of the City Council, I had the opportunity to co-chair New York City's Young Women's Initiative, really looking much more deeply at the issues facing girls of color. We are really encouraged by the work that's happened on behalf of Black and Latino boys in particular in recent years, right on up to President Obama's Men of Color Initiative. But what we understood is that there's an assumption that the girls are okay. And as we began to look at educational indicators, incarceration rates, school push-out rates, healthcare indicators, the girls are actually not okay.
Yeah, there's high incidence of sexual abuse,
absolutely.
High incidence of young girls of color in the juvenile justice system.
Right, and that number has been going up at a time when we thought that girls didn't need any kind of special attention. So I'm really excited that not just here in New York City, but across the country, philanthropy is beginning to pay a little bit more attention to how it directs its dollars. Governments like our own City Council and Mayor's administration have begun to look within their agencies to kind of think about how they intersect with the lives of young women and the degree to which they need to kind of tweak their practices.
Because it is an
well.
issue that has to be approached from various directions.
Absolutely.
If you're actually going to make a change.
Right.
One of the things that I find interesting about a campaign like this, you look at it and you go, what can you say bad about it? But there are people who've raised questions about whether or not the campaign in itself, if it's inherently biased because there's this focus on, you know, girls of color, women of color. Can you address that?
I mean, we are the nation's oldest women's organization, so if we did it any differently, I think it would be a little bit strange for us to kind of not be paying attention and doing a deep dive around some of these issues. I think the reason I'm so excited about the Stand Against Racism campaign is that it's part of a larger organizational framework. This is not an individual YWCA coming together and saying we need to, you know, kind of elevate this issue. This is a national consciousness across the country within our organization, across sister affiliates, saying that we understand that race plays a role in the lives of women, and we want to be part of a larger conversation in our own institutions, in our own practice at the program level, but also trying to raise awareness at the national level.
And how can people participate in this stand? I know there's petitions and some of the other activities that they can...
So each YWCA has its own kind of unique take on how to do this. I would really encourage folks to go to standagainstracism.org, put in your zip code or your community, and you can find an event in your local area that suits your needs.
You proud of the work that the YWCA has consistently done? I mean, it's been consistent about focusing on those issues.
I mean, I'm so proud to be part of an organization that speaks to every aspect of my own personal identity, that gives me a professional platform to kind of address issues that are second nature to who I am as a human being. But also that is not late to the party. This is not an opportunistic event for us. As I said, you know, Dr. Dorothy Height started these conversations back in the 40s and 50s when women's movements were really not paying a lot of attention to differences in terms of race and class and that kind of thing. So we're continuing an incredible legacy of work, and I'm very conscious of on whose shoulders I stand.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. And again, the website is standagainstracism.org.
Thank you so much.
YWCA. Thank you.